Welcome to the Dingus Den for a brand new creator interview, this time with Morgan Hampton, the writer of the current Green Lantern Corps comics and some other things. You know what? We'll get into it. I'm excited for this. Let's just dive right into it.
Welcome to the Dingus Den.
All right. Welcome into the Dingus Den. Welcome in, Morgan. Great to have you here. I mentioned this to you backstage earlier, but well, this is my first time actually having anybody on that works at either of the big two, which is awesome. And yeah, it's just a pleasure to have you here. So first off, just thank you so much for being here, which is just awesome.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This is great, and it's an honor to be your first guest from anyone at the Big Two. That's really cool.
It's just awesome. So, you know what? Let's just get right into this. So your experience so far. You first
Mhm.
got to start off with Cyborg and then being able to do some Star Trek and Green Lantern. But how exactly were
Yeah,
you able to break in to?
yeah. The long answer is as soon as I graduated, got my undergrad degree, I just hit the ground running in terms of like self-publishing.
Okay,
I started going to conventions, like smaller ones, not like San Diego, but like in
sure,
like regional ones that were close to me, meeting artists at my level that I could afford to pay.
sure.
And I just started, writing shorts, like no longer than like 10 pages.
Okay.
And I would do different genres, with everyone. I'd work with a different artist with everyone. And after a couple years, I had maybe 6 or 7 little short comics to my name. And the real way that I actually broke in was during, I guess it was during COVID. A year into COVID, DC put out a call for this thing called the Milestone Initiative, which is a talent development program, which they've done before. They've done talent development programs before. This one was specifically geared towards Black, Brown, and underrepresented voices because there's just frankly not that many of us in the comic book industry. Comic books, like a lot of industries, are very white male dominated, and I think they were trying to,
Sure.
help people get a leg up a little bit. And they selected 12 writers, 12 artists, and totally, like, we were all, I think I can say we were all ready for that opportunity. And it took someone giving it to us. And that was really what opened the door for me. That program specifically was about 10 weeks, I believe. We did a lot of stuff on Zoom. We worked with Amy Chu, who's a writer on the writer side. She helped us kind of learn how to write professionally. And then the artist worked with a teacher at the Kubert School. And they kind of fostered us through working through or writing and creating our first comic. That came out a year later. But then after that, we had kind of the keys to, reaching out to editors and stuff like that. They knew who we were. They knew we went through this program. So they were, for the most part, looking to give us opportunities. We just kind of had to show up for that. So that's kind of the long answer of
Yeah,
how I was able to
that's
break in.
cool. It's cool
Yeah,
that you're just able to like just have that opportunity to just kind of like just come for you and be able to, get in
yeah.
that way. But as far as like comic books in general, where really did like your appreciation or love for the medium like come from? Any specific stories or characters or like
Yeah, this is a very deep pull story that I'll give you. Um, when I was a kid, my dad had, a bunch of long boxes in the basement. So I didn't really like read them. I just like to look at the pictures when I was really, really young.
Sure.
I want to say when I first started paying attention to like the stories, I was probably maybe 7 or 8. And My dad had a comic book from DC called Tangent Comics, which was basically it was a Dan Jurgens. It's in a similar vein, kind of, to the Absolute Universe right now. It was an adjacent universe at DC where all the characters had the same names, but they had very different backstories. Like
Interesting.
Superman was a bald black dude who was a shaman. The Flash, instead of having like Speed Force powers, she had the ability like to shine light and stuff like that. So like I understood the concept of these characters from like, the Superman animated TV show or the Batman animated TV show. But this is the first time I like was introduced to like the multiverse, right? And I
Sure.
was like, it blew my mind. So I started collecting Tangent comics, which was so random. And then as I got older, I just, started absorbing everything. I was definitely a big Milestone fan. So like, of course, I grew up on like the Static Shock TV show too, but like I've read almost all of the Milestone comics from back in the day in the 90s and stuff like that. Yeah, comics has just been in my DNA since I was very young.
That's
I
awesome.
also think I grew up where I have a bleeding disorder called hemophilia, which I like to describe to people that don't know what it is I'm basically the polar opposite of Wolverine, right? Like he can heal from any injury instantaneously, and I'm the exact opposite. Hemophilia is a blood clotting disorder, and basically my blood doesn't clot. So growing up, I wasn't really allowed to go out and do things with my kids, because a lot of kids, especially boys, go out and scrape their knees and, hurt themselves. And with hemophilia, that stuff is, a pretty big deal. So my mom was very overprotective and I was kind of stuck at home. So comics and TV and video games, all that stuff was like really the only like window I had into the world when I was really young.
That's cool. You mentioned I'm a big gamer as well. And you sort of like what
Yeah.
big games are you into?
I call myself a very occasional gamer, especially as I get older. But like growing up, I'm a big Star Wars fan.
Nice.
I used to spend hours on end playing like Knights of the Old Republic. My goodness, man, that was my jam growing up. So stuff like that, kind of big sandbox,
Yeah,
or RPG types, like anything that I can fully immerse myself in. Like I was all here for that type of stuff.
that's awesome. Yeah. I really do hope that we get that new Knights of the Old Republic if it ever will
Fingers
happen.
crossed.
Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great story. Anyway, yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, I've also never heard of Tangent Comics. That's really interesting. I'll have to
Yeah,
see
it's like I said, it's a deep cut, but it was out for a couple years. Yeah, they just gave the keys and they were just like, do what you want with like the names of these characters, and he made a whole universe. It was pretty good.
That's
You
really
should
cool.
definitely check it out.
I'll see if DC Infinite has it.
Hopefully, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. So do you have one of my friends was curious, do you have like any tips for how to maybe try to get into the industry?
Yeah. I'll kind of rehash what I said earlier because my path was very textbook. Like most people don't break in through a program, because the programs are very few and but I'll go back to how I started, which was like I said, I was self-publishing. When I first wanted to start writing comics, I reached out, I sent a cold email to David Walker. Currently, you might know him as the co-writer of Bitter Root at Image Comics. But at the time, when I was trying to break in, he was writing Power Man and Iron Fist at Marvel. He's also done a Hawkeye series there. He did Nighthawk there. And I really liked his work. And I found his email and I was just like, how do I be you, essentially? And the things that he told me, and this is what I tell everyone else who's trying to break in, is you want to start small when you're trying to break in. I think a lot of people, especially writers, like they want to tell their big magnum opus, for their first go around. And like he was like, that's a mistake. Don't do that. Like, because you don't know what you're doing yet, right? You may have, a sense of story, but you need to learn the craft of actually writing comics, which is a completely different thing. So he's like, start small, do 5 to 10 page stories. Because if you can tell a story in 5 to 10 pages, you can do it at 20, 25, or 30, or 48 page one shot. You know what I mean? And then he was like, find people at your level, because again, they're going to be more eager to work with someone who's also just starting out, and also your bank account is going to appreciate it because you want to pay people what they're worth, but also like if you're starting out at your level, like they're not going to be breaking your bank account as someone like who's a name. Right. So I took that and I ran with it, and then like I said, I started going to local conventions, and what I one-upped from what he told me to do was I worked with a different artist every time, so I can learn different artist sensibilities. Because every artist is a little bit different too. Some artists are really hands-on with they want you to tell them every minute detail. Some artists want you to give them space and just kind of describe what's in the panel, and then they can figure out the composition of what that's going to look like. And then I also did a different genre every time as well, just to challenge myself and kind of have a resume for the different types of things that I can do. But yeah, if I can distill that in any way, it would be to start small and meet other people at your level and just cultivate relationships that way.
It's awesome.
And then, I'll say this too, because what I didn't understand at the time when I was making these short comics that I didn't get until I did the Milestone Initiative is the way you get work in comics, and this is at any publisher, unless you're self-publishing through like Kickstarter or whatever, or just paying for it on your own. The way you get work in comics is through editors. And I never understood that until I went through the program at DC. So once you've got a couple comics under your belt as a writer, what you were going to need to do is try to find editors. And they're pretty easy to find online, and email conventions at these publishers are not very hard to figure out. But you're gonna find an editor, and I'd say ask. And first of all, be familiar with their work, right? Don't just come in asking for work. You want it because it's a transactional thing already, but you want them to feel valued in some way. So be familiar with their work, compliment on it, and then ask them if you can share them a comic or a couple comics that you have. Hopefully they say yes, and then you can share that with them. Because the thing about writers in comics, which is really hard, is no one's going to read a script from us, unfortunately. You got to have a completed comic. An artist can have sample pages because that's what they do, but no one's going to read a script. So you got to have a couple comics under your belt. Ask an editor if you can share that with them, and then let them know, express to them that you want to work in comics. And then hopefully they are receptive to that, will read your comic. And all they really want to see is that you have a sense of beginning, middle, and end. And then hopefully another way that they start people off in comics is they will give you a 10-pager in like an anthology or something like that. Sure. And then that'll get the ball rolling. And then after that, it's just you have to advocate for yourself. Like once you get that first opportunity, that's great. But you have to keep working on that second one and that third one and that fourth one. It's a hustle. Sure. So don't think it's safe after you get that first gig. Use that 10-pager you got from that publisher to reach out to other editors and be like, hey, here's a 10-pager I did at Boom Studios or at IDW or whatever. I would love to work with you. That's kind of the way to do it, if that
Sure.
makes sense. Yeah.
So I am wanting to dive into specifically DC stuff that you've done and whatnot. But before we go there, you did write Star Trek, Sons of Star Trek, and I actually just read that for my first time a few days ago in preparation for this.
Nice.
I've actually never really read any of the Star Trek stuff before, and I will say, just from your story alone, it made me curious into delving into that era of stuff. Like, I'm a casual Trekkie. Like, I've read, I've watched some of the stuff of Star Trek, but like, casual. But I enjoyed what you wrote though, which is awesome, and so, and I don't know, like for Star Trek for you is there like a version of Star Trek that's your favorite?
First I'd say thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. For me, absolutely, like not even close. It's Deep Space Nine. And the reason it's Deep Space Nine, I mean, all Trek is great. I love all Trek. Even the Trek that's not good, I enjoy it. The reason why Deep Space Nine is so great to me is because it was a show that broke convention. It was the first show to break convention. Up until that point, we had the animated series, or not the animated series. I mean, we had that too, but we had the original series, the animated series in the 70s, and then the Next Generation, right? And all of those were basically about a crew on a ship that was going to different planets every week, one and done episodes, but it was traveling to the different things that they would do. Deep Space Nine is a stationary show. They're all on the station, and the conflict, for the most part, comes to them. And I thought that was incredible to break the convention in that way. It was really bold for the time. Also, every show at that point had followed a captain as the main character, and Benjamin Sisko was not a captain in the beginning of that show, and we got to see him grow to become the captain. Yeah, man, I can talk for hours on Deep Space Nine, but I'll keep it there. I'd say that's my favorite. And to Sons of Star Trek specifically, that's the book, or that's the show that book kind of spins out of the most. Those characters come from that show for the most part. Yeah.
See, I wasn't familiar with any of those characters because I don't think I've seen any of that show. Like I said, like when I say I'm casual, I've only seen some episodes here and there. Like my favorite iteration would be Next Generation, and but and so that's cool though. So like if you had the opportunity to write more Star Trek, do you kind of like know what you would like to do?
Yeah, I mean, if I can be extremely bold, um, I can say I have a degree in TV writing and producing. I just got my MFA a couple years back,
Nice.
and I haven't really been able to break into that industry yet. Hollywood is in a really weird space right now,
Sure.
but I think, I mean, of course, I would love to do more Star Trek comics. I'm not going to turn that down, but I think my if it's to do more Star Trek is I would love to be on a staff on one of the shows at some point. I think that would be incredible. It
Yeah, for sure. It's such a great legacy.
is.
Forever. Really one of the longest running things, which is just awesome too. That like even though like still you're part of the comics, but like even the comics go back a far bit as well. I wish
They
I
do.
remember what issue, but one of the first ever comics I ever got from a comic store was a Star Trek comic because it was whenever I first started watching the movies.
Yeah.
And so like I said, I wish I could remember what it is, and I just don't. And so,
Yeah.
but it's so cool. All right. So now let's go over to DC. First you've got well, there's the you mentioned your one anthology story as part of the milestone.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming it's directly from that is how you were able to get Cyborg.
Kind of, sort of. So yes, we did that. That took a year to come out, which actually is not normal. Comics, a comic cycle from like conception to artist finishing it, sending it to the printer and everything is like maybe 2 months.
Okay.
But I think they weren't sure if they were going to actually publish our stories when we did them because
Oh,
we were all learning, we were training,
sure.
and then I think they realized like no, these are actually really good. We should put these out. But it took a while for them to do that. So what I did after the Milestone Initiative ended is again like I had these self-published stories. I just came through this program. I started sharing all my stuff with editors at DC because I'm like, I don't want this to end, right? Like this was really cool program, that's great, but
Sure.
I need, I need to actually start my career, right? Um, so my first actual credit at DC was in a book called DC Power. It came out 3 years ago now, in 2023. It was the first version of that book because they've done it every year since. And it's a Black History Month anthology where all the creative teams were Black and all the characters in the book were Black. And my editor that I met through the Milestone Initiative was the one who was spearheading this thing. And he knew I liked Cyborg because when we interviewed for the Milestone Initiative, they asked us outside of Milestone, who are some of your favorite DC characters? And I talked about Cyborg probably for 20 minutes, which was actually insane because he is one of my favorite characters. So he was like, we're doing this book called DC Power. I know you love Cyborg. Do you want to write a Cyborg story for it? And I was like, absolutely. And this page was, I forget, it's 8 to 10 pages. So it's another anthology, right? So that was my first credit actually at DC, even though I had written the Milestone thing prior, it hadn't come out yet. And this came out maybe 2 or 3 months before the Milestone thing. So I did this 8-pager or 10-pager, whatever it was, for Cyborg. And I guess I did a good job. So that same editor, his name is Marquise, later that year, they announced a Cyborg book at DC. This was like in November. And I remember seeing that announcement and I was pissed because I was like, I want to write Cyborg. But I know the solicitation for it, it was just an announcement. There was no creative team announced. So he reached out around Christmas and he was like, hey, you know this Cyborg book that we're doing? I was like, yeah, I saw it. I wish I was doing it. He was like, well, do you want to? Because we don't have a creative team attached. And I was like, yeah, I want to do it. So that's kind of how it happened. It was me kind of expressing that I love this character that most people don't love. And it was an editor that was doing an anthology and needed a character filled. And he knew I loved that character. I did a good job on that story. And that snowballed into when they decided to do the book later that year. So that's
So
kind of how that happened.
I find that interesting. If I understand this right, you're saying that they officially announced this book to everybody before there was any
Mhm.
creative team that was actually part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find that wild that they
I
do that.
think I think what it was is they were having internal conversations about maybe offering me the book, but they also knew the solicits were coming up and they needed to put it out there. So because at the time, like I said, I had done 2 anthology stories. Prior to that, I had only self-published work to my name, and this was a 6-issue series. I had never written a full 20-page comic book before I got Cyborg. So I think, they took a chance on me, and I very much appreciate that chance. But it was they probably had to have some conversations before they,
Sure.
bit the bullet and gave me the offer.
That's really cool though. That I
Thank you.
also read that for my first time in preparation for this as well. And just because like I haven't read much Cyborg in general.
There's not
But
much out there.
I was about to say that's also true. I was
Yeah.
there's a lot of characters that are like, they're just very much team players. When I think Cyborg,
Yeah.
as I'm sure most people think of it in the same way as like, oh yeah, he's a Titan.
Right.
That's just kind of who he is at the end of the day for most people, which
Yeah.
which is fine. But I you have these scenes in that comic though that are like these like news scenes, and anytime I see those kind of scenes, I always go back to one of my personal favorite characters of all time, is Spawn. Was that at all an inspiration for your news scenes?
No, I can see the connection, but no, actually, I think my inspiration behind those was, well, one, I knew this book was going to be a showcase for one, my love for the character, but like my voice as a writer, and I wanted people to know that like as deep as things may get, I want there to be some levity in there, and that's just kind of the way that it manifested. But I also wanted this book to be. I want it to feel like the 21st century, right? Like Cyborg came out in the 80s or whatever, but I think he truly is a hero for the 21st century in a way that hasn't really been explored before my book. And I don't think, I think I'm the youngest person, at least for a series for Cyborg, to ever write him, right? Like I'm 32. When I wrote that book, I was 29, 30. Like, I don't think anyone who was a millennial had ever written Cyborg, right? So I wanted it to feel like we were in the present and not some 55-year-old man trying to write someone in their mid 20s.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what I was approaching with that. And we're on a podcast right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're much in that realm of like, this is how people get their news, this is how people reach people. And I wanted to give him a character in his kind of wheelhouse of characters that was like a Lois Lane, right? And that's what I wanted to do with Estelle.
Okay.
So that's kind of where that came from.
I could see that. You just brought up as well of like trying to like have Cyborg for this like modern generation, and as I was reading it too, I was like, it's crazy too of how much certain sort of like aspects of that story I feel like has really aged well, even though that story is only like what 2-3 years old, like a lot of those aspects have aged really well. Especially with like it's just crazy how much over the last year like AI has grown, and
Absolutely.
certain like just the contents of that story, I'm just like, they just stand up well in a way that you wouldn't have never intended for back then.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about this stuff is you have to try to keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on and use these stories to kind of reflect the things you want to see changed, and yeah, unfortunately things have changed for the worse since that book came out.
There's been a lot that's been going on, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I really like too that I want to say is I feel like it maybe got touched on a little bit in like other versions of Cyborg, especially a little bit, and maybe like Snyder's Justice League movie. But you really hit hard the relationship between him and his father, which I thought was such a great storyline. And like like I said, like there's just not much Cyborg out there, but that really is a great emotional relationship that you were able to dive into, which I really appreciate.
Thanks. Yeah, I think my approach to that and this whole book was like just said, there's not a lot of Cyborg stories out there, but whenever he does get the focus, the two things that we've been hearing for the past 40 some odd years at this point is I have daddy issues, right? Because my dad is responsible for me turning into Cyborg. And I don't know if I'm a man or am I a machine? Like, I don't know what's going on here. And as a fan of that character, I was just so sick of that seeing like that was the story that they approached every single time. So I was like, okay, I got this book now. I'm going to address these issues in my book, but for what I hope is the final time. Like, we're going to put the nail in the coffin. He's going to come to terms with his body that he's now in. It's no longer going to be am I a man, am I a machine? These are the cards I was dealt, and I have to deal with them. And we're going to put to bed his daddy issues in a way that I'm still really proud of, with like his father died and he wasn't able to actually like have the conversation with him. But now he comes back in a really interesting way, and they can kind of have that conversation before he's gone for good, you know? So that was my goal with that book, is like, so now in my mind, I'm sure it's still going to happen because I'm not writing like Titans or wherever Cyborg is going to be popping up. But for me, I wanted to put those issues to bed. So now Cyborg is reborn, right? He can have a new runway and have new issues to navigate outside of, you know, the predicament that he's in.
Yeah, it felt very bold to me that you were able to just kill his father. Was that like did you get any pushback from that, being able to do that? Like, that's only how open.
I will say, yeah. I'll say like 95% of that book came from me, like in my idea. That the killing his dad was an idea from my editor. He was like, what if we do that? Because everything else in the book was like I said, came from me. And I think he was trying to find a way to like one up it even more. And he was like, with everything you've pitched me already, what if we then also kill his dad? And I was like, I'm here for it, you know, because that's going to force Victor to actually deal with his problem with his dad, you know?
It's cool. Yeah, no, I was just like surprised by that. I was like, wait, is that really what they're doing? And yeah, no, it was cool of how it all came together. As well as we got to see like a bunch of like, I don't know, B, C list sort of villains in that too come up. Like villains I'm not really familiar with. The only one that I kind of like really knew of them, to be honest, was Gizmo, and that's mainly only because he was in that Suicide Squad game that came out like a couple years ago. And so, but how did like kind of like choosing those villains come about?
Yeah, so Cyborg doesn't really have a rogues gallery, like outside of the Titans, at least. So most of those villains, I think it was that first issue had Gizmo and Mammoth. Those are Titans villains. And then I think I'm blanking on who popped up outside of Solace, because I created Solace. He didn't exist before this run. But I think that guy's name in issue 2 was Fastball, maybe.
Sure. Okay.
He just throws balls. So a lot of those other guys, like I pulled from the comics. Seymour was in there. Those are Titans villains. Atlas that he fought in issue 3, that was also a Titans villain. I don't know if he was in the comics, but he's in an episode of Teen Titans from back in the day. It's him and Atlas, Cyborg and Atlas are like playing each other on video games, and then like they realize that like, oh my God, you're Cyborg. Oh my God, you're Atlas, and then they fight in real life.
That's funny.
Also voiced by the incomparable Keith David. So yeah, outside of that, I was just trying to plug in characters that like he's fought before, like in Titans, but because he really doesn't have any singular villains on his own. And that was another thing I wanted to do. I'm like, okay, he doesn't have a rogues gallery. Let me create someone that can be his like antithesis. And that's what I tried to do with Solace.
Yeah, I think you did that part like good. I think I like thoroughly like enjoyed that. Like I wasn't really sure what to get into it, just because like, you know, there's not much Cyborg. You don't know what to really expect when you read something like that. And so, but no, I went out and I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. I enjoyed it. All right. So now for the main stuff that I was excited, or I'm excited to get into, which is the Green Lantern stuff. Green Lantern is like my second favorite part of the DC mythos.
Nice.
And so
who's your favorite?
Batman. I mean, it's such a typical answer,
Makes
but
sense.
like, you know, it's bad, you know, very rich, but also, yeah. So Green Lantern, I love this modern era that Jeremy Adams started, you know, with Dawn of DC and continuing it on. And then you're able to join him on Green Lantern Corps. And that was the first thing that I want to ask about is how is it that being a co-writing like experience that you did for a bit there?
Yeah, it was I think it was interesting for both of us because neither of us knew that was going to happen.
Okay.
They kind of just like decided, and that's how these things work sometimes. Sure. I reached out to the group editor of Green Lantern at the time because there was no core, and I was like, hey, I have a pitch for Joe Mullen. I would love to share it with you if you'd be willing to look at it, blah, 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 blah. He looked at it. He liked it a lot. And he told me, this is a year and a half ago at this point. So like August, September of 2024. He was like, yeah, we're thinking about doing another Green Lantern book because Jeremy's run has been really successful. We're thinking of it being a Green Lantern core book, but the way that it's going to be is it's going to be a modular book where it's going to be arc based, and every couple arcs, the creative teams are going to change, and then we're going to focus on a different Green Lantern. And I was like, that sounds cool. And he was like, yeah, pitch the story you sent me as one of those arcs. And I was like, sounds great to me. I'm all with it. A month goes by. He hits me up and he was like, hey, can I call you? Talk Green Lantern. I'm like, cool, let's do it. He was like, so some things have changed. The book is no longer modular. It's now just going to be an outright ongoing book, which was also a big deal because at the time, the trend of the past couple of years is like books are not announced as ongoings anymore. It's like maybe it's like 6 or 12 issues, and if they're successful, they'll extend it. But he was like, it's going to be ongoing. It's already greenlit to be an ongoing, and you're going to write it with Jeremy. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds great. And I think Jeremy found out the same day that he was going to be writing with me. They just made the decision. But I think it was similar to Cyborg, that like they wanted to do something. They knew I'd had this steady grow in my career, and they wanted to give me an opportunity. And because this is my first ongoing book, right? So I think that's why they wanted to pair me with Jeremy. You know, he's very successful in his run. They want me to be successful as well, learn from someone who's doing it good. So yeah, I mean, and outside of that, like the actual craft of it all, I think what really helps is we don't live very far from each other. We're both in Los Angeles.
Nice.
And he actually lives like 5 minutes away from my mom, and I'm at my mom's pretty often. So like that helped. We would very often go to cafes or like a Denny's and just kind of figure out the story beats. Sometimes I would go to his house and, you know, write things on a big whiteboard. And then when it came down to the actual writing of it all, we would just have one document. And we would divvy up pages and then edit each other's work before we send it in. I think we really found our flow around issue 4. We started doing these A story, B story things. So we would follow one story for a couple pages and then jump over to another story. Right. And then the way we did that is he would take that one story and then I would take the second. So like we were literally writing our own little stories, and then sometimes they would come together. Sometimes they wouldn't. And then that's just kind of how we did it until, you know, the Starbreaker Supremacy things really came together again, and kind of blew everything up. So yeah, that's the long and short of it. Yeah.
So which of those like A, B story, like which ones was more you that you did?
Yeah. I'd say, I think 4 and 5 was kind of that 2-issue mini arc, because 1 through 3 was all A story. So we just kind of both kind of did that together. Okay. Issue 4, we started the A story, B story thing, and that was the ride along issue. That was when Narf was introduced.
Yes.
So he took the guy in the Narf story, and I took the Simon Baz and the Kelly story. And that was 4 and 5. 6 was
Mogo.
Jessica Cruz and Joe go to Mogo. What the other story is in now. Oh, the Sin Sons. So he wrote the Sin Sons, and I wrote the Jessica Cruz, Joe Mullane, and Mogo. Nice. And then I think 7 is when the Starbreaker Supremacy starts. So that goes back to mostly all A story. So we just kind of did all that together. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. I actually did just like reread all that stuff. Actually, I have it all right here as well. I just went through all this over the last day or so.
Nice.
So
I love that you did your research. I appreciate
that. Well, you know, it's just like I've been excited for this from the get-go. I actually did a review on the channel of the first issue when it came out. I used to do weekly live streams so, and this was actually our 3rd episode that me and the co-host at the time did. And so
nice.
And we both liked it, and I was like, this is just a cool start, because like I genuinely like love this modern era of Green Lantern. Like I feel like when people think of Green Lantern, the height of Green Lantern, like peak Green Lantern for people, I feel like is Jeff Johns. You know, he's the one that did so much great stuff, and you know, there's a bit of good stuff after that.
Yeah.
But like I feel like in particular what Jeremy Adams started, and then now that both you and him are doing now, has really like touched on a lot of those sort of like aspects to like that really made that old Green Lantern stuff great. And so I don't know, just something about this current Green Lantern. It's just like I haven't gotten the same like vibes of like, oh, this is the Green Lantern I really like since the Jeff Johns stuff. And so
that's great to hear. That's really good to hear.
And part of that is too, you all are able to tap into some great characters in this.
Yeah,
Such as I remember when I first read it in issue 2, and I had no idea that he was going to come in. One of my favorite personal Green Lantern characters, Atrocitus, and him being like a space pirate. I thought all that was awesome. Uh,
yeah,
that was just epic. What was the sort of decision of bringing back Atrocitus in that way?
yeah. I mean, I think because how long had it been since we'd seen him?
Oh, that's a good
Some
question.
time.
It's been a while because, like,
Yeah,
before Jeremy Adams did his thing, though, like the Green Lantern stuff in general was like really like it's kind of weird stuff that happened. Like Grant Morrison had his thing that was just kind of its
right,
own.
right.
I
Yeah,
don't remember the writer who did the Horridus, like all the stuff with John Stewart, but like yeah,
yeah,
it's been a
yeah,
while.
yeah. I think a lot of the stuff when it comes to just all the other like the entire emotional spectrum, like we probably haven't seen a lot of that stuff fleshed out since probably like Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns.
Sure,
Like
yeah,
that was when like the last time we saw Soren Ignatu and all that type of stuff. So it's probably that run, which was, that was before the Grant Morrison run. So that was like mid to late 2019-ish.
mm,
Like but yeah, I think a lot of those first couple issues, I mean, even the Starbreaker Supremacy too, but those first couple issues in particular of our run, it's spinning out of what Jeremy had set up in the main book, where it was like emotion is kind of like uncontained right now,
mhm,
and people are getting powers um, who don't have rings, and like the cores are all kind of disbanded because they don't have their central batteries anymore.
yeah,
So I think it was just a way to kind of outside of like the way they did them before.
mhm.
And of course they would find a way to exploit that power, being the Red Lanterns, for their own nefarious needs. So I think
Oh
that's
yeah,
really where it just came from. Yeah.
that's cool. No, I just love having them brought back. Like Green Lanterns are like
Yeah.
they're just great. They're awesome. As well as I love I think Jeremy. I'm pretty sure Jeremy Adams first brought him in and in his run, but then he came back a few times and actually most recent issue Larfleeze, which
Yeah.
I love seeing Larfleeze back. Another personal favorite
Yes.
character of mine as
Yeah.
well. And so and I can't wait to see as well where things are going on with the next issue and all that. Um,
Mhm.
quite the cliffhanger, I should say, that last issue ended up on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
um,
you.
but then also recently as well, you just brought back Effigy,
Yeah.
a I believe wasn't he a Ron Mars creation? I think.
I think so. Yeah, I'm actually in a weird way. Like I'm pulling. I know Kyle's not, especially with the
Yeah.
announcement that he's going to be in the new main book. Like he's not too
Mhm.
much in core, but like that run, man, that Ron Mars, Daryl Banks run from the '90s. Like I'm pulling a
Mhm.
lot from that. So yeah, Effigy,
Nice.
Fatality, who's now in the book as well. That's a Ron Mars thing character as well. They brought a lot of new, fresh ideas that we've seen kind of touched on a little bit since their run, but like I
Mhm.
really want to dive into fleshing these characters out a little bit. So yes, FG back, kind of. I mean, I don't want to spoil too many things. I know what happened at the end of 11, but
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
That's cool. No, it's cool though of like, I just mentioned all these awesome characters that come back.
Mhm.
I think a lot of them being just fan favorites as well. That's just nice to see back, and I think in a good way too. Like there's a way
Yeah,
that characters could be brought back and they're just like, okay, sure. And then there's other times when
yeah,
it's like they're brought back in an epic way. And especially like all of
yeah,
them too, it's like they're brought back in a cool way too, where like they're like actually part of the story and not just kind of there.
yeah,
And so it's great to
yeah.
see that. And it's one of the reasons why like I do like genuinely love this current Green Lantern era. I was excited to read more Green Lantern.
That's good. I'm glad.
So so as far as other characters go, you mentioned Narf earlier, which
Yeah,
he's such a great, like, fun little character, and
yeah,
obviously he's like one of these characters that's part of like the class group that you have going on, which
mhm,
is interested to see where that goes on, but that's a whole new character that
mhm.
how did his creation come about?
Yeah, it was when we were talking about that ride along issue.
Hmm.
Jeremy had this really fun idea that like Guy was going to get forced to like take a new recruit on a mission. And he's like, well, I got stuff I need to do so they can come with me to this really dangerous thing. Like, it's not going to be a typical ride along. Like, we're really about to go into some crazy stuff here.
Yeah.
And he was like, wouldn't it be great if that character that had to be stuck with him was like this kind of like, you know, this little scared weasel type of thing, right?
Sure.
And the reference he used was do you know who Alf is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like, let's make Narf this like Alf type of guy, but he's always like kind of like trepidatious and scared or whatever. But then like we find out his true power is like he can grow, you know, real big and get real ferocious when like the shit hits the fan. So that was kind of, you know, it was kind of a bit that he kind of wanted to use Narf in, and then it just became that like he was a great character outside of that, you know, a great contrast specifically to Guy, you know, so. Yeah,
that's awesome. I just love, like, one of the reasons I love Green Lantern is I love all the different weird kinds of aliens, and Narf kind of like just specifically showed like, oh, these are the kind of alien creatures I specifically love, and Green Lantern has a bunch of those. So
yeah.
do you have any like underrated Green Lanterns like that you like specifically really like?
Yeah. Oh, so many. And like too, like I think what's funny, not funny, but it's hard because like this book has a lot of characters. This book has a lot of Green Lantern characters on its own, and now we have all the like the emotional spectrum on Oa now too. So there's so many because everyone, I've seen, you know, people were like, "There's so many Earth Lanterns. Can we focus on some of the alien ones?" I'm like, that's a very valid thing.
Yeah.
There's so many characters. But yeah. So to answer your question, he was in. I put him in. I think it was 10. He's kind of in the background. I don't think he has any lines, but Volk, the Green Lantern whose head is just like a volcano.
Yes. Okay.
I love that guy so much. That's my guy. Give me a 4-issue Volk miniseries.
That's funny. No, I remember seeing him specifically because I'm trying to remember exactly what began and all that action. I think it was with that one chick who came through. I don't remember her name right offhand.
Fatality. Yeah.
Thank you. Fatality that came through. And then
yeah.
In the devastation of all that, you just see him pick up the goo baby.
Right.
And so, but yeah, no, that he stood out to me there. But speaking of that goo thing, like, is that an original creation from you?
Yeah, in a very roundabout way, but yes.
Okay.
Because I did another podcast the other day, and I told the person this because I don't think anyone's actually picked up on it on their own yet. You have issue 1 in front of you. He's actually in the first issue.
Is it? Oh,
it's in that scene when Joe and Guy are walking through the precinct when they're bringing Kanjaro back to Oa. No, it's not Joe and Guy, it's Joe and John. And Guy is sitting next to, yes,
there we go,
that gelatinous being. And at the time, again, that was right. It was like, this thing is going to blow up, little baby, and spray all over Guy, and it's going to be funny. And when I knew what I wanted to do for the concept of this character, I was like, why don't I go back and see one of these background characters and see if I can make it seem like they were there the whole time. So that's kind of what I was doing.
That's cool.
But when we put him there, he absolutely, that was not ever the plan. It was just like, I did that later.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's cool. I when I read that, I did actually notice him as being a background character, but I didn't realize until just now, oh, it literally is the same character. And so
yeah.
That's cool. So I mean, you talk about here, like, you have all these different characters that you could like use, and it sounds like you have a really open sandbox of characters that you get to use, especially with like where the events of especially Starbreaker Supremacy ended at. Like, it just seems like you have a whole lot in front of you with what you can do. However, at the same time, is there any sort of like boundaries that like you can speak on that you have?
That's a good question, because kind of no, which is crazy, especially on a book of this magnitude. I guess that means I'm doing a decent job. Otherwise, they might start telling me you need to do this, you need to do that. Yeah. I say boundaries, but sometimes they will lob me things that they want me to do to tie into the greater DC tapestry of it all.
Sure.
So like, I gotta choose my words wisely because I don't want to spoil too much. But I'm sure you've seen online, Guy Gardner after DCKO is going to come back a little different.
Yes, I have. Yes.
So that was something that wasn't me. Like what his powers are, I got to do that on my own and figure that out. But they basically told me Guy Gardner is going to come back from DCKO with some new powers, and they were basically like, "Do with that what you will." So I was like, "Okay, I'll do something. I'll do something fun with that." So I made him the All Sight, which I can't explain exactly what that means yet.
Sure.
But he's got some like extra sight abilities. And because he becomes kind of like because of that, he becomes kind of a religious figure on Oa, which is very funny. So I thought aesthetically, if he's going to become kind of a religious figure, this from a narrative standpoint would make sense for his bowl cut to be back because he's going to look kind of like a friar. You know what I mean? So they were like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, it was basically them saying, this big event book that we're doing, he's a character that's going to come back changed. What can you do with that? And then I just kind of ran with it.
That's cool. I gotta say, just like overall, I think DC is in a great spot right now. DCKO specifically, I think is like such a great event. Like, absolutely. I think really one of the best events in years, honestly. And so, it's cool to see that it's affecting characters in that way. And I specifically don't look at the solicitations too much, just because like I don't want to be spoiled. But as far as the Guy Gardner thing, as far as the Guy Gardner thing goes, though, I that was just one of those things that. Of course, when something crazy like that kind of gets out there, people talk about it. And it's like, oh, so that's what they're doing. Interesting. Okay. So I think I'm excited for it.
Going back to DCKO and like even the Absolute books, like a lot of internal conversation has been had about how all these books, even if they're doing their own thing in their own corner of the galaxy, like my book is, they want the universe to feel connected. So there really is a concerted effort across all of DC, even if it's a mainline book or an Absolute book, for things to feel like they're all part of this big grand tapestry. And like, and for us too, like to get like real insider baseball about it, like I think these books, like my book, getting announced as an ongoing outright is a direct result of like the Absolute books making so much money for DC so they can make books ongoings now. You know what I mean? So like everything is kind of feeding off of each other in a really like healthy way, I think, that we haven't seen in a very long time at DC.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think the All-In era is like the best DC has been in a very, very long time. And it just makes like just how I'm so happy to see, because I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Marvel. There's a lot of great Marvel stuff. But DC has always been like, if I could only pick one, that's the one I'd go with, And so
same here.
It's awesome to see that like they're really in a really healthy state right now, which makes me happy.
Everyone's really focused, which is great.
It's cool to see, and interesting as well to hear that DC's conscious of wanting to make everything be connected, but also it seems like just such a big crazy challenge to me, where like you also you want everything to feel connected, but then also for everything to stand up on its own just seems like such an incredible challenge across the board.
And then how fast comics moves as well. Like I said, like a turnaround on a book is like tops 2 months, but probably less than that. Like it is actually lightning in a bottle when any comic book gets released. Like it is so many intangibles that are going on. I have such a deeper appreciation now that I'm on this side of it, about like just how many things go into a comic and like how easy it can be for things to not go right. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's a lot of intangibles. So
it's that's cool. See here. Any Green Lantern characters that you kind of wish in general had a little bit of a bigger spotlight?
Like over the history of Green Lantern, or like right now?
Just right now.
I mean, I mean, I'm kind of doing it in the book, so
Right.
I guess, yeah. I mean, John Stewart is my Green Lantern. Like I
Okay.
grew up on
Yeah.
the Justice League animated show, and isn't something I want to tune in. And he spotlight, I'd say, a bit the past couple of years. Like you mentioned the Jeffrey Thorne run. He was a main character in that. Um, but I think what really excites me about the run that I'm on now, and I'll also say too about this book, we started this with me and Jeremy, and I'm trying to continue it now. Is there's no outright main character. It just depends on the issue that you're reading.
Okay.
And I think these first couple of issues, I've focused a little bit more on the John, but that's not going to be the case forever. Like I'm really approaching this book as kind of like a Star Trek book. Whereas, like, I know you haven't seen too much Star Trek, but like what Star Trek did famously in the '90s in particular is they have an ensemble cast, right? And they're in every character's in every episode, but certain episodes will focus on one character more than the other. So like you'll have a Picard episode or a Worf episode or a Deanna Troy episode. That's kind of what I'm trying to do with this book because there's so many characters. You know, it'll be a little arc based, but sometimes issue based as well. Like we'll be focusing on this character, and they'll be going through their thing while this larger thing is happening in the background. And then a couple issues down the line, we're going to shift that perspective, and we're going to be following mainly this character. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. And in that way, you know, all the fans can get their favorite characters can get the shine that they deserve, and all these characters can go through things. But for me, yeah, it's John, and I think what I've been really having fun with this character is spinning out of Philip Kennedy Johnson's war journal. He left so many things to kind of like chew on, right? The stuff with Ellie, the stuff with his mom, like that wasn't really resolved by the end of that book, and we got to do our interesting thing where we got to tie into that book and then the Jeffrey Thorne book because, oh my God, everyone forgot there's two John Stewarts in the universe.
I completely forgot about that until you brought him back. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. So we're gonna justify all these questionable decisions that have been made by John Stewart the past couple of years by saying it was the one that came back and now he's dead. And now this other one that basically has a gap in his like timeline is going to come back and see all these mistakes, if you want to call them that this other version of himself made. And that is very interesting to me. So I'm having a lot of fun exploring that. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's great as well to see as well. You know, we're also getting the Lantern show, and it's great to see that we're not only is just Hal going to be in it, but we're also having Jon Stewart in it. And so I think the way that they're approaching that with them too is going to be great. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah,
very, very excited.
It's Green Lantern hasn't gotten its justice on screen ever since. Well, you know, God forbid we talk about it. You know,
I animated series back in the day. I did like that.
Yeah. Yes. So, yeah. So, like, we're talking about all these like parts of Green Lantern history that you're touching back on, and obviously, you have to be respectful to it, but then at the same time, you have to do your own take and like what you're wanting to do for it and your own story. And so, like, is there sort of like a process for like or mindset you have for like how you go about this? Like, A, you have your research you got to do, and B, how exactly you're implementing that. Like, what's your overall take on all that?
Yeah, I'd say just off the jump, like it's now that I write comics, it is so difficult to keep up with comics. So I find the that I'm reading comics the most is when I do my research, right? It's when I go back and read that Ron Mars run, or like Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern, 8 years ago. And that's been really fun. I can just pluck things out of obscurity a little bit. And I think part of my process as a writer, I am character first. And what I mean by that is like when I want to do something with a character, I think about what are they going through personally and what kind of journey can we put them through to overcome whatever they're going through. So all these characters that I'm bringing back, I'm trying to bring them back where they're kind of at conflicts in their life. And the only way to resolve that is to go through it, right? And that helps me drive the story in a sense. And that's
Mhm.
big. That's a big part of what I'm doing with Fatality. Like I've had
Nice.
so much fun going back to seeing, you know, her creation being a mistake or whatever you want to call it that John Stewart did back in Cosmic Odyssey with Xanshi blowing up. And then her going through this journey of hating Green Lanterns, fighting John and Kyle, killing Green Lanterns, becoming a Star Salad along the way.
Mhm.
There's just a lot of threads to her that I'm pulling on, that I'm going to bring her into kind of a new state
Nice.
for her being. Yeah, very
Well,
excited for that.
that's really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great.
Of course,
I do have one last thing to ask though. Fun, I
sure.
think, ending question though. Uh, as far as going forward, if you could pick any comic that you want to write, any character, any IP group, whatever it is, I don't know. What's your like
Yeah,
wish list, or do you have one in particular, or a little list?
yeah. I'll give you two.
All right.
Um, I I grew up the biggest fan, like I said, of that show, Static Shock,
Mhm.
and you know, Milestone. I don't know if you know the complete history of like Milestone and DC, but they're not DC characters proper. Like they're licensed characters. Milestone was its
Right.
own publisher that was kind of distributed through DC, and they've had crossovers at certain points, and
Mhm.
they're in the same universe. Sometimes they're not. If you've watched Young Justice, they pop up on that show. Um, I would love to write Static, like a series for Static at some
Sure.
point. I think that's my like that's my magnum opus, if you want to call it that. I mean, I've got my own magnum opuses for like my personal things, but like my number one goal is to write Static, I think, at one point. And
That'd
then
be cool.
a 10-year goal, I'd call it, my long form goal, is I would love to write Superman.
Oh yeah.
And that's a newer goal of mine. Like I didn't grow up like needing to do that the way I need Static, but I think it's something that like I think if I could a book like that, which is a weird thing to say because I'm already writing comics, it would be a stamp of approval on like my career and what I mean to this industry and what I can bring to this industry. Like that's, I mean,
Hmm.
you know, for all intents and purposes, at least at DC, it started with Superman. I would love to put some of my DNA into that
Yeah.
character. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, such
Yeah.
a huge character. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I that's awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on here into the Dingus Den. This has been great. It was great having you on. Thank you so much. If
Yeah.
you
Thank
enjoyed
you
this,
for having me.
yeah, it's been awesome. If you like this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you all so much if you made it this far into watching, and see you all next time here on the Dingus Den. And if you want more of these kind of interviews, let me know. Until next time, see you all later. Bye.